Hi, I'm Jessica Stockholder. This is my third show here at the Not Saying Stefan Gallery. And the work behind me is the work you see as you come in the show, called Lay of the Land. It's a piece that I made in 2014 in relationship to a bocce ball alley in Piacenza, in Italy. And but it's a self-contained piece that has a different quality here than it had there. It's called Lay of the Land in part because it's related to landscape. And in English, lay of the land means it's a figure of speech that refers to taking stock of how things are in general, not only in relationship to the land. And my titles in general are not going to tell you what the work means. The work is visual, and it doesn't mean one thing, it always means many things. So I use titles in a way hoping that the words too will mean many things and sit alongside the work. What the work is made of is in some ways insignificant. It's not a literary work. I'm not telling stories with materials for the most part. Occasionally I do. The work is very formal and about its physicality. Every material that's used means something in many different ways, not one way. Where the baskets and the stools here were made as part of their meaning. Somebody else, not me, designed them. That the stools came from a tree is meaningful. The height of the stool is designed in relationship to the body. The baskets, too, are designed in relationship to hands and people's actions. And my whole work is made in response to people moving through space in relationship to architecture. I'm also really interested in color, and always, I don't know exactly why, but I think color is both emotive and very factual and physical and present in a space. It's also a material event. It's part and parcel of material, but we don't see it unless light's bouncing off of it, and the color of the material depends on the color of the light. So color is eventful, even though I use it as part of a picture-making activity. My work is very much grounded in painting and the history of painting, and I think coheres by virtue of people understanding what painting is, or just advertising if you don't spend time looking at paintings. I mean, there are pictures all around us that are often related to the history of art. So color, I think, is a place that's both ephemeral and without body, and at the same time extraordinarily physical. And I think that's analogous to being alive in some way, that we experience ourselves as body, and at the same time our feelings and thoughts seem to be ephemeral. At least I experience mine as ephemeral. So my work is about that movement back and forth between those experiences. And I often use light, like I'm using in this piece, for that reason. I mean, right now this work is lit by daylight coming in the window, and that light changes all the time through the day and the seasons, and the color of daylight shifts. But the incandescent light that's in the lamps is a warmer light, and it's constant. So I play with the color of light in the work, which is part of the color on the work. I'm using mirrors in two different ways. There are mirrors on the stools that are reflecting the baskets and the lights above them, and there is some paint on the mirrors. On the one layer of the mirror, there are at least two layers, the surface and the paint, and then the reflection from above in the mirror. And that adds to the layers of the whole work. It's a very layered piece. It's about a thickness in a way. And I like these oval mirrors because they refer to the shape of the eye. And I grew up in Vancouver in Canada, where I was surrounded by the art of the Northwest Coast Indian people, which is an extraordinary work and with an incredible history. And you might know the totem poles, and the imagery on the totem poles is orchestrated by the shape, this oval shape, which I take to be related to the eye. And in contrast to the history of Western painting, where the rectangle is often related to windows or doorways, the eye is actually on the body, and the rectangle is in the architecture around the body. So I'm interested in that distinction, these different ways to understand picture making. And there are also mirrors on the walls, 2 mirrors on different sides of the work that reflect the piece and are also like eyes. Since there are 2 of them, they're also like as if they're watching the piece. And I enjoy this kind of, they're security mirrors or driveway mirrors. They're used so that you can see people coming around corners. I enjoy their relationship to security generally in the world. That's maybe a little bit of narrative, perhaps, in the work. And I also like that you don't often see yourself in these mirrors, that you see a lot of the world in them. So it's a way to play with reflection and mirroring without having it be all about oneself. So I think that in my work, I'm often doing very similar things. I have consistent interests, but I don't have a consistent way of pursuing them. So part of what I'm interested in is pulling the rug out from under me. And when I start a work, I have to, for each work, propose what its coherent structure is. So if I were just a painter, I could propose for myself always to be painting on a rectangle, and that would be a consistent way to work. And in my case, I'm always working with different materials and inventing, again, the boundaries of my activity. So these 2 pieces I'm standing next to I made a group of works like this, where in my studio I worked on small things, and on the top of each one of these there's a small work, and it was nice to do that because if you work at that scale, the world is full of material that's possible to use, all kinds of stuff. It's inexpensive and everywhere. And then the question was how to make this small thing have a life in the world. Where was it going to be? So I designed these bases for them, and unlike the work that's on top, I actually didn't make those bases myself. I designed them and somebody else built them. The top part here is made of MDF and painted, and the 2 of them they're sort of an off-white, different colors of off-white. And the bases are made with cut-up wooden furniture that are cut to fit the precise size of the top. And I think it's interesting, for me anyway, to think about the relationship between the things that are made by other people that I buy or find. So this is styrofoam and a toy surfboard that's been cut up, a piece of marble, maybe a sample from somebody's kitchen counter, and pieces of paper, a small piece of electrical wire, a metal box. Those things were all bought, designed by people, manufactured, not by me. And that's one way of accumulating information and material. And then these pieces were designed by me, made by somebody else, but the material was also designed by other people. I mean, the MDF is manufactured at a certain scale for a whole system of building. The furniture the raw material was furniture for this, was designed by many different people. This work behind me is called Decals Roam to Move, or Decals Roam to Move. The decals are like paper that sticks onto things. Unlike some of the work, you might have a tendency to read this work left to right. It's eventful left to right, these panels leaning against the wall. That's not true of the work that was in the other room where you kind of take it in all at once. And it's also dealing with planes. These are hollow core doors that are the supports. And there's I think a rhythm to the work. It's kind of rhythmic and made with a whole variety of materials that create these shapes that are probably have more to do with the door than the material. So there's tree bark, cork veneer, sheep's wool, and there's some paper laminated onto one of the doors that's actually a photograph. It's an iPhone photograph that was blown up really large of a stomach. You wouldn't see that, but it's there. I enjoy the bark and the sheep's wool in dialogue with the grain of the wood that's on the doors. The doors are heavily manufactured. You don't experience them as very natural, but it's wood too. So I enjoy in that work the movement between how things are so processed and their immediacy and plainness. So the work behind me is called Messed on the Beach. It's also made with a God's eye and interested in the 4 triangles and a triangle painted behind it. I like the way the plexiglass that's leaning on the wall behind the work is transparent and carries color that's also transparent, and that kind of thick sort of cloud of color is resonant with the intensity of the yellow rope and the color of the triangle painted on there. It's also fixed to the corner. This work always has to be fixed to a corner in this way, so it's related to sight in a kind of generic way, a little bit more specific than a painting that can hang on any flat wall, but nevertheless it can move to many corners in different spaces. So working in the studio allows for me to work differently than I work when I'm working in public or in relationship to a particular on-site exhibition. So unlike the work Lay of the Land, which we started with here, these works were made without having to know what I'm doing. I don't have to have the work all planned out from beginning to end. And that allows for me to make certain decisions, to move ahead with one way of thinking, take note of it, and then intersect the work with a second way of thinking. So one of the things I'm always interested in is symmetry versus asymmetry, a quality of unity and finish and stasis in the work that's then disrupted with the opposites of all of those things, like a chaos and asymmetry. So this work behind me involves the use of a God's eye made with a metal pole and a tree branch. And the God's eye is, as best I understand, comes from South America. I was drawn to it as a way of making that's interesting structurally, that you have 2 loose vertical sticks or poles, and with the string or rope, you can knit those things together. They become static and very stable structurally. And also, in a way, it makes a cross form, but then it also creates 4 triangles. And the triangle shape is interesting in that the 3 corners point away from itself. So unlike a square, it's more dynamic and kind of shatters itself, because your eye moves in all these different directions and away from its centrality. So this work is called Floored. When making work generally, for me, it's kind of a struggle or a constant question about what to make the work out of. And in this case, I ordered online a dance floor. So these tiles are sold to be a dance floor. You can snap them together. And so I think those tiles, as a group, they speak internally to each other, and there's references and suggestions of forms that develop internal to the painting, but then there's also parts that have nothing to do with each other. So it's a kind of, in that way, there's a lot of air brought into it, and it sort of explodes outward. And because there's space between the tiles, there's room for the part on the floor to participate in the wall painting. And grids are interesting always because they're so present in our lives. They're present in everything that people make, in architecture, the city structure, in furniture, in ceilings. This floor has a grid, the parquet floor, the walls, you know, the doorways in the room have grids on them, the windows have grids on them. Everywhere you are, you always find grids. So the grids function in relationship to the world and how people think. And also they function in relationship to economy, because the economy structures how things are made. There's an efficiency that's demanded, and to make things in relationship to the grid makes it more efficient, for better or worse. So these smaller works behind me, they're made on 6 by 6 inch panels that are ready-made, bought from the art store. They're a kind of relaxed thing to make. I make them with like ideas that occur to me as I'm moving around the studio, seeing things that are just sitting next to each other. I feel always the need to disrupt the cohesive internal nature of painting for myself. So I use the rectangle, I put paint on the surface, I enjoy the way in which the paint creates space and the possibility for illusion. And then I always want to put some real material in there alongside it, and I want the edges to be disrupted and to invite some of the rest of the world in. And I think part of the reason for that is that if I work only inside the painted surface, every mark that's made is too powerful, and I wish to have my effect on the work and my agency tempered by the other things in the world. The work in the login is made in 2006 and was actually shown here in an earlier show in the gallery. And choosing a work for that space is a very particular thing, because people don't enter the space and the work is seen just from the window outside. So that work is installed just a little differently than it would be otherwise in another space. It's installed so that the green basket comes very close to the window. And the work is about this stacking of things in space closer to you and then moving back towards the wall. And in that space, it's stretched out a little, and I added the pink rose-colored wall behind it so that the whole small room that you're peering into is filled with that color and resonates with the red, yellow of the plastic stools and the 2 green baskets.